Alright, so here's the deal. There's something to fucking thinking about. Is like, like astrology and shit. Like, motherfuckers is on that fucking dick riding bandwagon, right? They're like, fucking Capricorn or fucking Taurus or whatever the fuck. Dude, alright. If you didn't know any of that, you just looked at the sky. And have you ever been out away from fucking light pollution, like you ever been away from the city and shit? You'd be like, just a cluster of fucking lights out there. Oh. And then you'd be like, well, that kind of looks like this. Just the same thing we do with fucking clouds. But clouds aren't consistent, which, thank God they're not. But like, fucking, so, okay. So you do the same thing with clouds as a kid. You go, well, that one looks like a rabbit, or that one looks like a pile of mashed potatoes I just want to eat all day. Yeah. Anyways, well, yeah. Okay. So these motherfuckers, they must have just like, cause they realized the archetypes, right? And then they're like, oh, I see a bowl in the sky. All right. Well, let's fucking see how the Earth goes, right? And then we'll be like, oh, well, that constellation represents this. Not that, I think they even came later. It was just the constellations, right? And this one represents a bull. So then you'd be like, okay. And then if you personified that, well, you'd have a fucking headstrong motherfucker, right? And then, so then all of a sudden it's slowly personified into what Taurus is right now, right? And then you go into like Libra and all this other shit, right? And okay, well, now people were believing that, right? Even if the evidence in their own life didn't pertain to it, they were still going like, well, this is real, like, this is real, right? But then some people probably started questioning, going, well, no, I'm not. Like, what this is saying is not me, right? So then they were like, but part of it is because the archetypes always, there's always a little bit. You can always relate to like any archetype, no matter what, because the reason they're archetype is because they're the epitome of a certain characteristic, right? I mean, for the most part. But so like, okay, and then all of a sudden, then they started coming up with Capricorn rising, Sagittarius falling, fucking whatever, Libra. Like, I didn't even heard of this till a couple years ago, and I'm like, well, what kind of horse shit is this? Like, literally, bro. And it's because, you want to know why? Because somebody had 2 kids or something like this, and they knew 2 people who were like, literally, like, the same thing. Like, I have 2 kids. They're both Libras. I'm a Libra, right? Fucking, the one is like fucking really active and like very hands-on and very like practical and like very wants to do all this shit, right? The other one is like wants to do a bunch of shit, yeah, but is like very much the opposite in how they perceive the world. Like, she's like very like artsy and very like very girly, very, it's more yin, much more yin, very character, like imaginative, and like they're both different sides of the brain. You can see when the one's running by the left hemisphere and the one's running on the right. But like what I'm trying to say is that they are like completely different personalities, but they mesh so well together though, right? But they're like completely different personalities, and they're both Libras. And then I'm a Libra, and I'm like, what? Like, I'm just saying, like, if you were to use your brain, you could come up with, be like, well, why are they different? Well, now they like I said, they came up with a different way of going, like, well, they have this Sagittarius rising on this point in time, and blah, 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 and that explains it. And it's like, well, all you did was make archetypes. And then, like, so it'd be like, if you only pick up with, like, let's say about 25% of the one, then you're going to pick up with 25% of the other, and then there's going to be some third thing there, and you're going to pick up with more of that, and then you'd be like, well, that kind of explains who I am, even though it really doesn't, because who you are cannot be, I mean, you can kind of categorize the person, but you cannot fucking completely identify with it. Like, you just can't, because every person is different. It doesn't make any sense to be like, and all they're doing is conforming to the social idea, which is not reality. It's just a means of trying to make sense of reality, but it's not reality in itself. It's like religion and shit. It's not a means of reality. It's not really means of dogmatic reality, because there's no dogmatic reality. There's just reality, and then we try to make sense of it, and then it leads into like a dogmatic belief. But basically, the whole thing about astrology is that it's just fucking archetypes that people have come up and they've been like, oh, well, that kind of looks like this, because for some reason I relate to that. Right, and that's how like arts formed like originally with that. Nobody understands it. Now we're starting to pick it up because we're starting to be able to articulate this shit. But literally, they were like, "There's this thing in the sky," and I'm like, "Oh, that kind of looks like this," and we all come to this agreement that kind of looks like that, right? Oh yeah, and then we kind of like, oh yeah, and then you'd be like, hey, and then because it's really cool to be like, hey, do you know where Orion is in the sky? And you'd be like, oh yeah, and everybody's like, oh yeah, that is Orion. I've heard of that. Yeah, it's kind of a cool thing, right? Right. But then they started trying to map the universe out, map well personalities, which is a major part of our universe. Try to map that all out, and then they're like, and then they really fundamentally believe it. But then the characters, and then they started creating archetypes based on the characters that they have labeled, that they've mapped into the sky, and then they realized that there's a plane of how the Earth spins, and then they were like, all right, well, this is the 12 months, right, of this, because even if you go to the zodiac thing, you'd be like, okay, how does the Chinese zodiac go by year? And then tell me how that explains everybody in there. Like, really, like, okay, so everybody within this year is a monkey? Like, as the monkey characteristic? Sure, all of them probably do, because at some point, because since it's an archetype, everybody can relate to some way. Yep, that's it. So fucking wake up, man. Wake up to the truth, because the truth is that all of this has just been put on to reality, or whatever the fuck it is. All of it has been made up as archetypes from that, and it's not fucking fundamentally real beyond the fact that archetypes, and then that's why they're starting to divide it up, and then you have all this other shit like the Sagittarius, rising, Capricorn, fucking Libra. Like, what the fuck does that make? Like, really, you just had 3 different archetypes there, 3 different archetypes. Like, so then, well, I guarantee you can relate to all 3 of them in some way. Like, come on, dude.